A young mother died in childbirth. The baby hadn't been saved either. Ironically, the birth of a child often meant the death of the mother, even if she made it through the labor. After the birth, she would be weak and susceptible to illness, and many of them would not live to see their own children grow. Every time one person was born, another always seemed to die, and there was no guarantee the children would grow up afterward either. Survival to adulthood was far from certain, and a parent had to be very lucky to see her own child grow up. Having 2 or more children was a blessing, granted only to the extremely fortunate. And to have survived his grandmother's age could be called a miracle. "I don't want you to die." The moment that was out of his mouth, he felt so sad that tears spilled from his eyes. His mother had died soon after giving birth to him, and his father had passed away long ago too. He had gone out hunting and never came back. "I'm sorry for mentioning it. Yes, I shouldn't have said that," she said kindly, as his sobs became even harder to stop. "It's okay. Granny will do her best to stick around until you become a grown hunter." He wanted to make absolutely sure. You have to promise," he wanted to say. Excuse me. He wanted to make absolutely sure. You have to promise," he wanted to say, but he was sobbing so hard to put the words together. His journey began when he decided to put one foot in front of the other. "Father, far as I can go," he repeated to himself over and over, like a spell to keep any other thoughts from his mind. He walked and walked, but only ever saw the same endless scenery: gray sky, white desert, black mountains. The world was so colorless. With a backdrop like this, even the hue of a monster would brighten things up. Long ago, when people had lived in this massive place called Cocoon, the world had been filled with colors. The earth had been covered with green plants and flowers. The sky would change on a whim. It was said that when the sky changed color, so did the mountains and ocean. When Cocoon had disappeared from the sky, the world had also lost its color, and color was far from the greatest loss. Most of the world's lives had been extinguished too. The majority of people, animals, monsters, and even plants had died. The home of tens of millions of people, and all their facilities and buildings had fallen to the ground. Under its own immense weight, Cocoon and its pillar had shattered into pieces. Many of the towns on the ground had also been destroyed, along with most living things here. Still, some people had barely escaped, and those who lived in the remote regions had fortunately avoided disaster. If the fall had just been a lump of rock in an empty field, then maybe humanity would have gone down a different path. But it had fallen on human cities, while living people had always created waste, and not all of that waste was harmless. Of course, energy plants and various factories had produced waste, much of which was harmful to organisms. And Cocoon had fallen on land where people lived. Of course, there had been toxic substances there too. And what would happen when large quantities of unprocessed waste materials were spilled all at once? A wide radius around Cocoon had become completely unlivable, and the survivors had warred over the few remaining inhabitable areas. It was said arable farmland still existed back then. The people should have banded together to protect that small farmland, but the people had refused to work together and chosen conflict instead. They all just wanted to make it through their own lifetimes, thinking of no one but themselves. As a result, more lives were lost, and the facilities that had maintained their livelihoods had been destroyed too. They never recovered the toxic substance. The toxic substance accumulated the ground, and what little farmland had remained was lost. The wild animal population dropped like stones, and the birds disappeared from the air. Fruit-bearing trees and the grass for the cattle withered up, and all that remained were plants like moss. That was all within the first century of Cocoon's fall, his grandmother said, coughing a little. "Are you all right? Why don't you lie down?" "That's right, teacher. You had a high fever 2 days ago, didn't you? You have to lie down." His grandmother had been in poor health lately, but still, she said, she was feeling good for the first time in a while and restarted the classes after a few weeks of hiatus. It was a tiny school with just one teacher and 4 students. His grandmother told him that when she had been young, there had been many children, dozens of students to a class, in the land where she had grown. There were 2 villages side by side, and the children had come from both. But soon after she had married his grandfather, the animals they had survived on had disappeared. The land should have been far enough from the ocean, but the pollution had finally reached them. The people had moved, seeking a place far from the ocean and from where Cocoon had fallen. It had been in the middle of that journey when his grandmother had seen mountains so tall they seemed to reach the heavens. In their new home, his grandmother had given birth to a son. 2 years later, she had given birth to a girl as well, but the girl had died before she could walk. The animals had vanished from that land too, and the people had moved again. Grandfather had died on the journey. He fought to the last to help people escape from a herd of monsters. After great suffering, the people had arrived in a land where they would build this village, and then within not even a few years, the animals here had disappeared too. But there was nowhere else to move to. Monsters were the only things left to hunt now. The toxic substance that spread when Cocoon fell were not all that threatened the lives of the humans and animals. Dust made of crystal particles, finer than sand, would enter their lungs with every breath, building up and make them sick.